Welcome to the Impact Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Sara Pritchard. This is a podcast where we dive deep into the real, uncensored truths about addiction, recovery, and everything in between. No sugarcoating, no judgment, just honest conversations that can help lift up the solution. So let's get started. Today, I'm excited because I have our friend at Impact, Adam Stevens, LPC with Unicorn Sober Services.
Mm-hmm.
How's it going?
Pretty good. Very grateful to be here this morning.
I know. I'm excited. I'm excited we're here because we originally had another date and you were traveling. And so glad we made it happen.
Yes.
And then Katie Sanders, of course, has been on before in the past episode. So if you guys haven't seen that one, go check it out. I was trying to think this morning, I guess when we met was when we met through Katie, and then we were doing like some recovery work together.
Yeah.
That was like the first time we met, right?
I think so.
On Zoom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, over Zoom. Yeah, like 4 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that.
I really today wanted to get a little bit of backstory about you and how you are you now, and then also just some insight on things you see within, because you work a lot with families and individuals that are suffering from substance abuse, and just certain trends, maybe misconceptions.
Okay.
Just pick your brain on these kind of things.
Okay. My journey, my story, who I am. I got sober back in 2009. The state of Georgia, required, they wanted me sober really bad. And in the state of Florida.
Oh,
And
two
so,
states.
yes. So my story includes a lot of legal issues that mounted up over the course of several years. And one of the things I would do in active alcoholism is I would just neglect responsibility. And one of those responsibilities was following up with legal issues. And I just acted like it didn't even happen. And the thing about warrants and legal issues is they don't just go away, no matter how much you drink.
Yeah.
And I remember one time I had gotten bailed out of jail. I was down in Statesboro, actually. And
That's where I went to school.
And a friend of mine who was sober, she was about my age, and I thought it was very interesting that she didn't drink and didn't do anything. And I call her my AA angel, and she said, Adam, a little sober time never hurt anybody. And I was like, because I knew something, my journey, my run was coming to an end. It was either going to end up in like treatment or jail. And ultimately I chose treatment because I didn't want to go to prison for it was like 900 and something days.
Yeah.
And I figured I would go there for a few months and just check the box and then keep doing what I was doing. But that somewhere between like 3 and 5 months, something like flipped and changed, and I was like, oh, this is actually all right. I might be able to do this. And I also became a father while I was in treatment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was very, very challenging at times because I was just growing. I was a child myself.
Yeah.
Growing up, trying to figure out what it was to be a man, to be sober, to take on, to be responsible, pay bills, get to work on time, do all of those little things. And I had no idea how to do those things, especially sober.
Yeah.
I remember part of our requirements in this place I went to was that we had to get a job after a certain point. And I could not find a job anywhere. I mean, I probably applied to over 100 places. I even, like, and I didn't have a car, didn't have a driver's license. I was taking MARTA all over Atlanta to find jobs. I even took MARTA down to the Varsity off of North Avenue and tried to get a job there, and they were like, "We don't think you're the varsity type."
Oh, yeah.
And and so and this was pressure was mounting because if I didn't get a job, I could eventually get kicked out, and if
Right.
I got kicked out, I would have my probation revoked and then go to jail, and so I eventually went to, um there was an Arby's right up the street from where I was living. It was, like, the closest business establishment where I lived, and somebody told me, "I have a feeling there's something up there for you," and so I went up there and I talked to the lady, and she said, "Well, I'm not hiring right now." And I was like, "Please just give me a chance. Like, I won't disappoint you." You know, like, begging for a job at Arby's.
Yeah.
And she said, "Okay, come back Monday morning, 9 o'clock for an interview." And I was like, "Okay." So I get, that weekend comes around and I get this was like 2009, 2010, and I get the swine flu.
Oh my
And
gosh.
and so I'm, like, so sick, and then that Monday, it snows in Atlanta, and so I'm, like, walking to this interview in the snow with the swine flu. You know,
Wow.
I don't have a phone to call and be like, "Hey, I can't make it." And so I show up and I get the job, and it was like, you know, it that kept me in treatment and also introduced me to, like, working in sobriety. I would work, like, very few days a week, very few hours, but I remember, like, working maybe, like, 5 hours and being exhausted
Mhm.
and just like, "How do people do this?" But that first year of sobriety was like, learning how to do things sober,
Yeah. Yeah.
learning how to, like, make friends sober, talk to people sober, get a job sober, pay bills sober,
Well, and, like, when you're talking about that, I just am thinking of, like, how you're literally with the swine flu walking in the snow to try to get a job at Arby's, like, so desperate and
Mhm.
so willing because earlier in your story, you're like, "I just drank away my problems, like, I could not, face anything," and here you are, literally, it's like, when back in the old days, I walked
I
to
know.
school in the snow, uphill, yeah.
Mhm.
Like, you're doing that, and I think that's important to point out because it's like, when we get that gift of desperation, it really is a gift because I would assume you woulda if you could have, like, brought that willingness on your own earlier on, like, prior to your getting in trouble with the law, like, you probably would have done that.
Right, right.
And so it's just, like, really neat to hear that switch that was flipped that you said, like, maybe that happened at 3 or 5 months or
Mhm,
whatever of, like, no, like, I have like, this is not an option, like,
mhm,
you're, like, seeking out everywhere trying to find a job, no one will hire you, and you just keep pushing,
yeah.
you just keep going, because early sobriety can be hard and uncomfortable,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm sure you were, like, not feeling great at times,
Oh, yeah.
and so to just, like, keep pushing through that and then also I thought it was funny how you were like, "Yeah, my sober friend," which I thought was so strange,
Yeah.
like, same, because 'cause I've had, when I was actively drinking, I knew people that were sober, and I was like, "Why would they do that? Like,
Yeah,
what's the why?"
yeah. It is fascinating.
Yeah, it made
Mhm.
no sense to me,
Mm-mm.
but thank God for her
I know,
and,
I know.
to be able to be not scared to tell you the truth, not scared to hurt your feelings, and just tell you the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah, yeah, she was a little sobriety angel. Mhm.
And then maybe, like, if you would touch on a little bit about people that are possibly facing jail time, because I know that can be, like, really scary. Like, what your thought process was like, with all that, and I know you had the option to choose treatment over jail time, but
Mhm.
maybe if you could just, like, walk us through a little bit to maybe help people that are potentially have the same, thing going on.
The first 2 like, 1 to 2 years of sobriety, I was in a lot of courtrooms and
Mhm.
like having to make those legal amends and all this stuff I had neglected the years prior. I had to like show up and be like, not knowing the outcome, showing up and, hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst.
Mhm.
And it all went, kind of went in my favor. Um, and so that, it took a lot of, like, prayer and, like, I remember a few times because again, I didn't have a car, didn't have a driver's license, other men in my sober community, they would ride with take me to court, when if t 2 times this one guy, he drove me down to Statesboro, like 4 hours down to Statesboro and back, and knowing that I remember I would tell him, "Look, I may not be riding back with you, but just, thank you for the ride down." But I always came back, and I would show up. I remember one time I, like, had my hand up, they're like, "Raise your right hand," and, like, my hand's, like, kinda shaking because I,
Yeah.
didn't know the outcome, and but it did go in my favor, um, and a lot of those, judges like it when you're sober.
Yeah.
It really bodes well for the outcome
Mhm.
oftentimes, sometimes it doesn't, but it is like, to be able to show up and be like, "I've done this, I'm changing, I'm doing this, I'm part of this community and this program now." Um it does go a long way because the majority of people that get arrested, they're drug and alcohol related,
Yeah.
and the majority of people sitting in jail or prison right now, they're there for some drug or alcohol related crime,
Yeah.
and it's, the things that drugs and alcohol will make me do, will make, people do is yeah, it's why the jails are so full,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people in jail right now that maybe don't necessarily deserve to be there. They just, need treatment or need help, need a solution.
Mhm.
And but yeah, the if you're facing some jail time, well, first get a lawyer. and it's and not everybody that gets arrested for drug and alcohol related crimes are like necessarily an alcoholic or a
Right.
drug addict, um but if it's maybe like your 7th or 8th or like, 10th arrest, then there may be something going on there.
Mhm.
And because it's like, that's not what makes me an alcoholic. It's like all of our stories have very, different facets to it. But what makes me an alcoholic is when I start drinking, like something happens in my body and I can't stop.
Yeah.
And then that causes me to make reckless decisions and not really fear the consequences in the moment. It's and then even when the consequences come, I can drink more and just neglect them to the side and pretend like they don't exist. So it's like analogy I like to equate to my story, and maybe some people can relate to this. Is it's like I was running from this tidal wave, and I finally had to like stop and turn around and face the tidal wave and let it like crash over me. But the thing is it didn't drown me. It didn't take me out to sea and wash me away forever. I just had to let it hit me. It was a little painful, but I lived. I lived through it. Mhm.
That. Yeah.
Mhm.
And thank you for pointing out that, like, just because you've been arrested and had jail time or whatever, that doesn't make you an addict or alcoholic.
Right.
It is. It's once the substances go into our body, we have no control. We don't know what's going to happen. Normally, I drink more than I intend to, and all
Mhm.
bets are off, and I can't stop. And then, yeah, like you said, make reckless decisions and things that go against what I believe and, all
Mhm.
sorts of stuff. You get sober, you start getting in a community. And oh, the other thing that I was actually going to mention was like with you going to court and being like, I don't know if I'm riding back with you or
Mhm.
not. Um, from other people I've talked to that have had similar situations, they just trusted a higher power,
Mhm.
God, the process. They just trusted if they went to jail, it was still gonna be okay. because they were seeking recovery. Um, and they weren't, like, happy about it, and they were terrified, but at
Mhm.
the same time, they were just like, "I'm at peace with whatever happens because I'm just gonna continue to do what I'm doing." And you're right, a lot of times it does work out in the person's favor, and sometimes it doesn't, and then it's like, okay, you get to go be of service in this jail community or whatever, which maybe is, not what you wanna do, but I've also heard some really cool stories that
Mhm.
happen there where they can be sober, get sober in jail, and start up, you know, recovery communities in there.
Right, right. That was I would there was a lot of faith and trust in the process,
Mhm.
and knowing, and there was actually I had a friend who was maybe, like, 2 or 3 years ahead of me at the time, and he had his experience included jail time where he had shown up to, to I think the same county as I was, and had been sober at that time for, like, a year, and the judge was like, "Oh, well, I don't care, you're going to jail."
Yeah.
And he said that he was able to, carry the message into prison, and I was so that was in my head. I'm like, "Okay," and he was just preparing me, like, if that happens, maybe that's where God needs you.
Mhm.
Um, but that didn't happen, and I was able to carry the message, other places, and,
Yeah.
but that was always in the back, a lot of prayer, a lot of, like, just faith in the process, like, "Okay, this will work out, and whatever happens, happens." Because it could have gone, the other way, and, but fortunately, it did not, and who knows how my story would have turned out, that way, because, it's not even easy to stay it's not like, it's not easy to stay, people think, "Oh, you're in jail, you can stay sober, there's no access to drugs." Well, there you can get drugs in prison,
Yeah.
probably, rather easily,
Yes.
and that's, speaking to people, they've said that it's not, necessarily easy to stay sober in jail
Mhm.
because you have access to substances just as easy as the outside.
Kind of fast forwarding a little bit, you end up I was looking at your bio and you were the first addiction track at the University of North Georgia.
Yes.
So what does that tell us about that and
So I went, so I got sober, and then I went back to and got my undergrad, at Georgia Southern, and it took me like a year just to get back into school, just because I had been, kicked out. You get arrested on campus and cause a scene, twice. They frown upon that, and so I had to, like, go through that, process and make amends for that. And I remember I finally spoke with, the person I needed to speak to, and I told her, like, what was happening, my story, and she was, like, almost in tears. She was so grateful about, like, what I had done, and how I, like, went about getting back in school. And so I did that right at, early sobriety, and then, I guess it was, like, 2017-ish, I was just sitting with God, and I heard this message of, like, "You need to go back to school and go into the field." And it was a before that, it had been like this quiet whisper, and now it was like this roaring yell, like, "You need to do this." And because I did not want to work in the field like, avoided it for a long time. I didn't wanna, just be that person that, got sober and is like,
right.
"I'm working in the field." So I I had a lot of barriers. I applied into school, and they had just started this addictions track at University of North Georgia for their, um, counseling program, and I remember I had to take the GRE, like a graduate exam, and I needed to get, like, a certain score or above, and I got, like, exactly that score, and I had not taken a standardized test like that in years, so it was
Oh,
exhausting.
yeah.
I mean, just,
If I had to take a test, right, I still have dreams that, like, I'm, like, late for a test, I didn't study, like, I can't imagine taking a real test.
so exhausting, and And I got in and it was like the first, um, like I guess a master's in addiction counseling it was the first time like a university, like an accredited university in the state of Georgia had something like that. And it was, yeah, it was very, because I was able to bring in like my experience, with addiction. And then also, so I have like this twofold, like there's two parts of my brain when it comes to addiction. There's like the education side and then the experience side. And it's helpful. Sometimes it can like get messy up there,
Yeah.
bouncing back and forth. But yeah, and I've been able to work in various fields. So in residential treatment, in like treatment services or drug court and like family treatment court. And like I do outpatient counseling now at a private practice in Alpharetta, and then also crisis work, which like that's not all. Occasionally we see some addiction doing that, but a lot of times it's mental health, suicidality, psychosis, and that's here, like, in I guess, like, I cover, like, Forsyth County, Hall County, like, Northeast Georgia mainly,
Mhm.
and go visit people in crisis, and so if you're having a mental health crisis, you can call the mental health crisis hotline, and this includes addiction too, and it's 988, and they will talk to you over the phone, and if you need a team to come out, no matter where you are in the state of Georgia, a team will come out and see you. And even if it's in the Waffle House, in the Kroger parking lot, in your home, at your school, we'll even come to a jail if you're there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's yeah.
So getting into the field because you were resistant to it,
Mhm.
I guess, like, what are some patterns, maybe, I don't know, patterns that you're seeing with addiction that concern you most for maybe, like, lack of resources or lack of solution or.
There's always been and probably always will be like a lack of resources, especially for those that are like on lower on the SES,
Mhm.
and there's not a lot of um, resources for people on like Medicare, Medicaid, and especially in Georgia. But there are a lot of like nonprofits and like and available resources out there. You just have to know where to look.
Yeah.
And then the I guess other trends is like so like we've been through like the opioid crisis and epidemic, and that's been, I think, the last 2 years overdoses have dropped
Mhm.
significantly,
Yeah.
and so have suicides, which is, like, good news. Those are, like, good signs that, like, things are starting to trend in a better direction because it was pretty gnarly there, like, in the middle of the pandemic
Yeah.
and, from, like, 2020 to 2022, 23. And so the overdoses are going down, which is good. I think more people have access to Narcan,
Yeah.
and more people have access to, like, the solution.
And
Um,
Narcan, just explain what Narcan
yeah,
is
so
to
Narcan
people that don't know.
is it can reverse an overdose. It's like this nasal spray, and I think every paramedic and every police officer has it. Most treatment facilities have it. I carry it around just because in my car because you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know, and but it will reverse an opioid overdose if someone has stopped breathing because the reason people die of overdose from opioids is your breathing slows and slows and slows until it stops. And so this can reverse that, and it's very easy to use.
Mhm.
And I think you can get it for either very you don't need a prescription for it. You can go to like CVS, Walgreens and get it, and you can get it fairly cheap. And
Yeah.
then there's a lot of places that like hand it out
Yeah.
nowadays. But it's that I think that's one of the reasons for the reduction in overdoses recently, and then just better access to care.
Are you seeing, like, more of the gas station drug stuff? Okay.
Yes, yes, a lot of gas station drugs like the kratom, the
Yeah.
7-OH, the I don't even know if, um, spice is around anymore, probably, but, like, just different variants
There's always something new, it
of
feels like.
yeah, because it'll get banned, and then, like, a new product will come out that hasn't been banned because it has, like, some new chemical formula.
Yeah.
Um, but that stuff's pretty nasty. Like, I think you're probably better off smoking crack than anything out of a gas station,
Yeah.
at least any drugs out of a gas station, and then like, along with that, like, we've the legalization of cannabis across the country, in various states has made just accessibility a lot easier. And with with my crisis work and then also intervention work, we see a lot of young people that are in drug-induced psychosis, or
Mhm.
maybe they've got like a thought disorder now, like schizophrenia or schizoaffective, that may have been triggered from cannabis use in their teens or early 20s. And that's very, very sad to see when that's emerging in a young person for the first time, because it's like, okay, your life's going to be different now, and it's
Yeah.
going to be challenging. And sometimes people can come out of it and live a happy, successful life, and sometimes not. And it's not everybody that smokes is gonna, like, have that happen to them, but a small percentage, will, and it's hard to say, like, would this have happened without the
Right.
cannabis use, or would it have, you know, did it just speed along the process?
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's so interesting that you bring that up because I it's been kind of a topic of conversation for me over the past few weeks about, like, like a drug-induced psychosis or the, acceleration of a mental health disorder because of using substances or, like,
Mhm.
somebody that seemed okay, and then they took some things, and then they're not, and, just how I don't know, that's just come up recently, and I haven't talked much about it, so I'm glad it's coming up here.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's very, it's scary, it's
Mhm.
interesting, and there's something to it. I mean, like, there's, like, a decent amount of research out there that shows that can link it to, um, like, schizophrenia and schizoaffective, disorder, and it's I know, like, the earlier somebody starts smoking, using THC really in any form, um, they do increase their chance of developing that. So, like, if you're smoking when you're, like, 12, 13, 14, yeah, it increases those chances. I
Wow.
don't know by how much, but
Yeah.
it does.
Yeah. That's
So
crazy.
and especially if an individual has a family history of thought disorders,
Mhm.
especially a parent, then, then it yeah, I would avoid it at all
Yeah.
costs. Mhm.
Entire abstinence, as our text likes to say.
Yes, yes.
Staying on the topic of mental health, but maybe talking about it in a different perspective. So, with the addict and alcoholic, we suffer from, you mentioned like our bodies react differently. We have the addict alcoholic mind, but then we have this like internal condition.
Mhm.
Um, so, can do you see like how it can be how mental health can also be confused with, like, our spiritual illness or the spiritual malady inside,
Mhm.
because I was having a conversation yesterday, it's confusing because like, a lot of signs of like, alcoholism can be you can be depressed, you can have
Right.
anxiety, you
Mhm.
can all these things, so do you see that?
Yes, and especially, it's like somebody comes into treatment and and they've been, like, drinking, and smoking for the past, like, 10 years, and you take that away, it's like, well, of course I'm gonna be anxious and depressed and, like, irritable.
Right.
And, like, my mood's gonna fluctuate, so I may even appear and show symptoms that I'm, like, bipolar,
Uh,
and I'll be, like, high energy, energetic, excited maybe one day, and then, like, very sad, depressed, isolated for, like, maybe the next few days,
mhm,
and so it can and, like, during that time, it's like, it takes about, like, a year to a year and a half for the brain to heal
mhm.
from, coming off drugs and alcohol, and so, like, during that time, my mind is bungee jumping. I mean, it's like, there's early on, it's up and down, eventually some equilibrium comes, but just physiologically, the brain is trying to heal from all of the external, like, dopamine it was seeking. And so the brain there's part of the brain that really likes drugs and alcohol and really prefers to get those chemicals from the outside world because then it's like, "Oh, well, I don't have to make them anymore."
Yeah.
And so there's, like, the part of the brain that enjoys that because our bodies and our brains are kind of, like, lazy in a way. They wanna do the least amount to get the job done. So if my brain's not having to produce these happy chemicals because I'm feeding it to them, then it'll, like, kinda, like, slowly shut down. And so that first year of sobriety is is very up and down, and
Mhm.
especially like, the first, like, 6 months, 90 days, 6 months is where a lot of the change happens. It can be so I remember showing, being very anxious, very, depressed, and that's like so there's like that physiological component, and then also like when I just left untreated, because alcohol treats alcoholism. It does, and it's very effective for a long time. I mean, I wasn't able to drink that long, but the amount, the length, most of my drinking, it worked. It was
Mhm.
treating the ism.
Because I feel like if families are listening, they're like, "What? Alcohol treats alcoholism?" But you're talking about that internal condition when you take the alcohol away from me, as you mentioned, I feel restless, irritable, discontent, so I am not okay in my own skin.
Mhm.
Therefore, I need relief, and if I cannot find it somewhere else, I'm gonna go back to the bottle every single time because I know that it works.
Right.
And the problem is like, yes, it works in that moment or that hour or whatever, but then, like we talked about earlier, I have no control. So I'm just
Mhm.
gonna continue to keep going and going and going until, the body physically stops me, I get a
Mhm.
consequence, enter blank. Um, and so but yeah, like, that's why we continue to drink, and I think families get so confused because, like, you just got out of jail and you're drinking, or you just got out of the hospital and you're drinking again, or you just overdosed and you're
Mhm.
shooting up. It's like because the substances do so much for us, and they
Mhm.
provide something for us to be able to be okay until it's not.
And right, until it stops working,
Yeah.
and my baseline is like that not being okay, that restlessness, the irritability, the discontentment, the world's out to get me, I'm a victim, like, how dare you do that? And, just brewing and being fueled on, like, resentment, self-will, um, agitation, and so I have, like, the option to it's like, "Okay, I can treat it," and I think for the longest time, I didn't know what I just knew I could treat it with alcohol. And
Mhm.
then this other solution, this spiritual solution was introduced to me and I was like, "Okay, this can treat it as well." It's not as instant. I
Yeah.
can't just like, boom and treat it like that. It's like it's this long-term process and it's like I have to be diligent and disciplined about doing these things that keep me fulfilled, spiritually, because, that's the issue. It's like it's in here, and it's really an inside job to change my internal state because I will want to look for external things to change the way I feel. I mean, I can even fall into this today of like,
Mhm.
"Ooh, I need those shoes," or "I need to buy," "I need to get this, I
Yeah.
need that." Like, "This is gonna make me feel better." Like, "Oh,
Right.
ooh, maybe I do need a new car."
Yeah.
And, like, these things can really, like, they can maybe make me happy for a fleeting moment, but what I'm really after is, like, that joy, like, that everlasting internal joy that's, like, radiating from me throughout the day, no matter really what's going on externally.
Right.
And that may be the key to life is, like, finding that, whether you're, alcoholic or not, like, finding that because it's yeah, the world is not gonna, like, give me happiness, or joy at least, and so I've got to, find it elsewhere, and that
Mhm.
elsewhere has been through, like, this spiritual program and developing a relationship with a higher power, call it God, the universe, whatever. The word doesn't even matter, but it's like that thing, and even like breaking it down to just love. I used to do this one group, and it was about the meaning of life, and we would do it like every Monday, and we would discuss. It was like all people in early recovery, and we would talk about like what the meaning of life is. Like, and I would write on the whiteboard, the meaning of life is blank. And every time we did this, it always came back to love. And not just like that love, like, oh, falling in love or like romantic love. It's like, no, like this deep, deep love that's like in all of us and that's like at the center of the universe and can't and like it once that gets awakened, then and that's like alive inside of us because it can get alcohol like clouded that, but it just had to be, dusted off and cracked through.
There are absolutely many people out there that can get caught up with the word God or whatever with certain upbringings, and it's like to look at the power behind the word
Mhm.
because there is absolutely a power in my life working that has removed the obsession to drink, first and foremost, but then it's just, like, so much more after that, right?
Right.
Like, I was talking to someone the other day, and I just I say this often, but I really just wanted to get back to the way it was. Like, I really was like, when I was in Statesboro, like, "Can I
Mhm.
just drink and party at night? I can still get up and go to class. I can do these things." And our text talks about our lives will be recreated. Like, we get
Mhm.
and so it's not even it's so much better. And, like, just not drinking is, like, the first I guess, spiritual experience that maybe I had of, like, that obsession being removed, but then it's like, it goes so much further than that. Like, that's just a
Mhm.
byproduct of this program and this spiritual way of living and a power working in your life, and, I think if people can just get down with the fact that there's a power that's gonna be working in your life that's bigger than you, because obviously if you could handle it, you would have done it by now, usually, and I don't know if you see
Mhm.
that, like, when you're talking with people, but
Similar experience. It's like I had this moment, it's like that desire, that obsession to drink was removed. I was like, well, if this power can do that, then like what else can it do? Like where else can I take this thing? And
yeah.
like and then like throughout the next several years, I like saw like, and even today, just instances. It almost feels like having a cheat code in life, like to where you get like these like special, um, like powers or guidance of like to get through things and to like it's like magic kind of,
Yeah.
and yeah, and like I want everyone to experience that,
Mhm.
because I believe everybody can experience that because it's like I'm just, I'm not special, I'm just a dude, with that, not that special at all. I have a, like I'm just like anybody else. And I sometimes like to think I'm special,
Mhm.
but I'm not. I'm not.
Just changing, topics again here because I did wanna talk about this because I think this is also very important for families or loved ones that are listening, with like the work that you do with interventions, like the failure to launch type person
Mm.
who is maybe been living in their parents' basement or they haven't gotten a real job or
Mhm.
responsibilities? Like, what are some trends you see there um, that maybe could be helpful for families that might be listening? Or how you've helped people in the past with that kind of situation?
Mhm. I was a failure to launch
Mhm.
myself, living at home, drinking in the basement, and thinking, and like, so a lot of times dads think, oh, well, he just needs to get a job. And then, and it's like one of two things. It's like, oh, he just needs to get a job or he just needs to find a good woman.
Yeah.
And so D a lot of times that's not gonna work, like, if you have what I have, that's not gonna be enough,
No.
because I tried to get I did get a job, um, while in active alcoholism, and then I was fired from that job.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I was fired from 2 jobs in the same day. Yeah, so
Put that one on the resume.
and it is difficult being young and in 2026, and then especially if you throw an addiction on top of that, um, and the other thing about me is, and what I found other people like me is, I can really charm you and like make you think I'm doing so well, and like deflect and place blame on other people of like, oh, or and like buy myself time because that's all I'm trying to do. It doesn't even matter. Like, I'm just trying to buy enough time to get through the day, and like, again, push those consequences or confrontations off until tomorrow.
Mhm.
And so if you're gonna confront me about my drinking, well, I will, like a magician, come up with things to delay it as long as possible, even if it's just an hour,
Yeah.
and just so I can do what I wanna do. And with often, so I do interventions too, and oftentimes in situations like that, the person just needs to, be they need to be taken out of that environment, especially if it's not healthy for the, like, 'cause if you have somebody in active addiction living in your home, it's gonna make the home, pretty turbulent, and, resentments will grow within the family. It's chaotic, and so, and that person, and I'm thinking of myself, and then, like, other people I've seen, like myself, like, I need a community of people like me. I need to be around people like me, and need to get, learn how to live life on, with responsibly on my own, and like that cord needs to be ripped, the from and the only people that have the power to do that are usually the parents that are, in the home, oftentimes enabling the behavior, maybe even not even knowing they're enabling the behavior.
Right.
But it's, and and everyone worries like, oh, well, I don't want my child to be homeless. A lot of people, we don't end up homeless that often.
Yeah.
We're rather resourceful,
Right.
and we can continue what we want to do for maybe an X number of days, weeks, but it it can get better. And then, so I've met people who said, I'd rather be homeless than get help. And
Right.
we'll do that.
Which is absolutely so insane.
Mhm.
It's the
That's
yeah.
the power of addiction, of
Yeah.
alcoholism. It's why I call it the second most powerful thing in the world.
Mhm.
Because I've seen people who, I mean, we could say that probably the strongest bond on earth is probably between maybe like a parent and a child, maybe even like a mother and a child. Yeah, I've seen, like, that love is, like, so great, and, like, hard to penetrate, but I've seen this disease rip through that like tissue paper,
Yeah.
and seen people knowing that they would lose their children forever if they went out and used again, yet they did it,
Yeah.
and it's like, that's, like, scary how powerful that is.
Yes.
Like, what's stronger than that? Like,
Mhm.
so you, and that's, like, that's what we're dealing with, is something that that insidious, that baffling, and that powerful. And so it kind of gives me chills sometimes to think about. I mean, I've seen it rip through marriages, rip through like, you know, high paying jobs. And because there's really people get sober or like enter into treatment for like five reasons. And one, a doctor says, look, you got to get help or you're going to die. Two, a judge, like in my case, says either you get help or you go to jail. Three, a family member says get help or you're out.
Mhm.
Um, Four, a job, an employer says you need to get help or you're losing this job, and that only works if you have like a high end job. And and then the fifth one is like every now and then that internal voice is like, you need to get help. And usually it's a combination of like, maybe one or, two or three of those things. But yeah, this we're dealing with something very powerful. And so yeah, people will choose to be homeless or choose to leave their family or their career or neglect their health or,
Right.
sometimes even go to jail. But it's the person who's in the basement and nothing can be done. That I'll just say they're probably not gonna get better in the basement.
Right, right.
The
Or, like, if they're the family's paying their rent at
Mhm.
their condo that they're living in, and they're drinking themselves every day,
Yeah.
and I love Chad Luncher talks about this all the time or says this all the time. He's like, "Do everything to support their recovery and nothing to support their
Mhm.
addiction." And so because people and it is very confusing for the families, like, they have no idea what to do.
Right.
I say this all the time, we didn't get a class in school on how to handle, my son doing a line of cocaine on the kitchen table,
Mhm.
right? So everyone is very confused and emotions are high and everything like that, and I think people can get scared on, like, well, like, then I'm just gonna not help them at all, and, like, sometimes they need the help to actually get to a place to get the help,
Right.
and, every situation can be different for sure. But I think that what Chad says all the time, do everything to support their recovery and nothing to support their addiction. Then you can kind of figure out like what works best for you and your family on how to make that
Yeah.
happen,
And it can be confusing because it's like, what is supporting, like, recovery versus
Mhm.
addiction? And it's okay, and I was told something very similar, and my parents were told something similar too early on because I thought the most important thing that happened in my recovery early on, it wasn't going to treatment, but it was at 6 months, I was going to return home and move back into the basement, and I had these plans and had my discharge paperwork, and I thought I was leaving, and I go into my counselor's office and my parents are sitting there, and I'm like, "Oh, so what are y'all doing?" And he was like, "Sit down, Adam." And that's where they told me that, the 3 of them said, "You're not gonna come home. You need to come up with a better plan than this." And that, like, jolted me into, "Okay, this is for real. I gotta do something different."
And
And
good for them.
yeah, because if I would have gone back home, I don't know if I'd be here today, like, and still have maintained sobriety. And so that, like, dramatically changed the course and the trajectory of my adult life because it would have been 'cause again, my little plans and designs of what I wanna do and how I wanna do things are, like, oftentimes wrong, and so it's good that, like, there were people in my life to check me and be like, "No, you don't," and I still see that I'll see that counselor, he's retired now, but I'll see him every now and then and, like, thank him for that because it changed my life.
That's
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah.
Aw.
So, it could be and that's with like, the boundaries don't stop once the person leaves the home
Right.
and is in treatment. Like, if anything, it can be a little harder because it's like, "Oh, well, he's doing so well. He's been sober for 3 months now,
Yeah.
or he's, like, made all this progress. We can just let him come home." And so and it's not like, I mean, there are instances, rare instances where, like, maybe it's appropriate and the person can come home, but majority of the time, no. It's like you need and, like, this addiction is it's largely, like, a young people's issue. These I mean, like, it affects every age group, but, like, the bulk of the people seeking treatment are between the ages of, like, 18 and I think, like, 34, 32. Like, that's, like, over 50% of the people seeking treatment, and maybe, yeah, it's higher than that, it's like 60 something percent, and so in part and it's coupled with that failure to launch. It's like
Mhm.
this failure to, like, jump into the world successfully, and there are many reasons for that, a lot of which aren't, like, necessarily, like, a young person's fault, and it is very hard to live now, but part of being sober and part of my story was just, like, growing up, like, just, growing up taking responsibility for, like, this wreckage and being, like, being a man,
Yeah.
and that's why, like, I have a soft spot for the young man that's struggling and is, like, kinda lost in the world and is, um, really trying to figure his place out in the world, and the difficult thing with that is, like, if if we wait too long, like, life can pass us by, and then you're, like, just bouncing around, with no direction, and so again, this, like, this little magic, this superpower that I've got now, it's able to, like, provide me, wind in my sails and direction like nothing else ever has.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
There's help out there. There's always, like, a it's never too late type thing, and, like, I have this unique perspective because I do see, like, as a therapist, interventionist, crisis responder, recovering alcoholic, I've seen a lot, and one of the things I did towards the end of my drinking was it was like, I had to go I was like, "Oh, I'll go see a therapist, and, like, that'll help me out," and I would go and see this lady once a week, and it was literally the only responsibility I had, so it would be the day I took a shower, I, like, shaved, and, like, got dressed up, and would present to her like I had my shit together,
Yeah.
and even though I did not. Because at one point she told me she didn't think I was an alcoholic, and I was like, "Yeah, I know. Like, can you tell the judge that? And can
Right.
you tell all these other people that?"
That's
And then
music to my ears.
yeah, and so I had gotten in some trouble again, and she said, "Well, you should try to stop drinking for a month," and I was like, "What?" She may as well said 30 months. It
Yeah.
was like that distance was so wide for me. There was no way I could make it a month without drinking. Um, and so I see it's like I will do these things to like push off responsibility for as long as possible so I can continue to keep doing what I'm doing. And that I'm sure that's happening out I know it's happening right now out there with a loved one of a family that may be listening, and it can be like with the interventions we say we like to bring, like raise the bottoms up because the ultimate bottom with this is death. And that's everyone's greatest fear. Is like losing a child. It's like the worst thing that can happen to somebody. And that's why these things are very like fragile and delicate with when working with families, but they're you know we know this disease inside and out, and it's very predictable. Like us alcoholics, we're all very predictable. There's
Yeah.
only like 5 or 6 versions of us.
Right.
And again, back to like the fear of being homeless or like dying on the streets, the place somebody is most likely to overdose and die is in their parents' home.
Wow.
And so, like, statistically speaking, that is where they will, if they do overdose and die, that's probably where it will happen, in the comfort of, mom and dad's home.
Yeah.
And so it's a painful process for everybody involved, to extract that person out, but I've seen it happen so many times in, like, positive stories
Yeah.
where someone goes on to be, thriving member of society, being being of service and helping out the next person, being, gainfully employed and just being like and then but most importantly, like, being very happy and, like, at peace because that's priceless.
Yep.
I mean, that is, like, the whole goal of this. It's like, it wasn't just enough for me like, I I like to feel good, so if I were not a happy customer of the sobriety thing, I would have gone back a long time ago. For me to get in in this and stick with it, it means a lot because I love feeling fulfilled and happy and joyous and free. And so that's why I stick around and continue to do this. So if that ever changes, I'll let y'all know. Mhm.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was
Mhm.
great.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to another episode. I hope today's conversation has inspired you, opened your mind, maybe even your heart a little bit. But remember, you're not alone. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll have all the links below so you can find Adam and Unicorn Sober Services. But until next time, keep making an impact. Bye, y'all.